So today we're going to talk about divisibility rules. And the reason we're doing this is just because we're going to start a unit and we're going to have to be able to divide really quickly. And this way we can just look to see really quickly if a number is divisible by another number. So what you need to do is this is going to be part of your notebook check. So call it Divisibility Rules right there. So go ahead and title this in your notebook. And what you're going to have to do is just jot down each rule, okay? So you're just going to have to jot down this information. So, number 2. So a number is divisible by 2 if it is even. So that means, remember, even numbers are 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. So if a number ends in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, then it's even, and that means it's divisible by 2. So you need to copy this down. So you need to copy down the number 2, and you need to write what's in this box right here. So you can pause the video if you need to. You do not need to write down the example. You do not need to write down the example, but we are going to go over it. So 642 is divisible by 2 because it ends in a 2, which is even. So because it's even, that means it's divisible by 2. So you just look to see if the number is even, and if it is, you can divide it by 2. So number 3, so remember you need to write down the number, and you need to write down the rule. So a number is divisible by 3 if the sum of the digits adds up to a multiple of 3. And multiples of 3 are just 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and you keep counting up. So you can pause the video to write this down. But what you need to do is, so 423 is divisible by 3 because, so you add up the digits. So we have a 4, a 2, and a 3. So you add them up. So 4 plus 2 plus 3 is 9. And 9 is a multiple of 3, right? Because we can do 3 times 3 to get 9. So that also means that 423 is divisible by 9. Number 4, so write down the number and the rule. A number is divisible by 4 if it is even and can be divided by 2 twice. So 128 is divisible by 4 because if we divide it, well, because first of all, it's an even number, it ends in 8, so it's an even number. And then because half of it is 64, and then we can also cut it in half again. So that means it is divisible by 4. So if it's an even number and we can divide it in half twice, then that means it will be able to be divided by 4. Number 5. So a number is divisible by 5 if it ends in a 0 or a 5. That one's easy. So if the number ends in a 0 or a 5, so 435 ends in a 5, so that means it is divisible by 5. That's your easiest one. So guys, make sure you're writing down the number and the rule. So number 6, a number is divisible by 6 if it is divisible by both 2 and 3. So basically you're taking the rules for 2 and 3, and you need to check to see if it's divisible by 2 and 3, and if it is, that means it's also divisible by 6. So 222, that should say is divisible by 6 because it is even. So remember, it's even, that means it's divisible by 2. So now we need to check to see if it's divisible by 3. So remember the rule for 3, I'm going to scroll back up. Remember the rule for 3 is you add up the digits and see if they're a multiple of 3. So if we add 2 plus 2 plus 2, we get 6. And 6 is a multiple of 3, okay? That means that 3 can go into 6. So that means it's divisible by 2, and it's divisible by 3, which means it's divisible by 6 as well. So then we're going to skip to 9 because there are no rules for 7 and 8. So number 9, a number is divisible by 9 if the sum of the digits adds up to a multiple of 9. So this one is very similar to the 3. So what you need to do is take all the digits and add them together to see if it's a multiple of 9. So we have 9, 2, 4, 3, so we add them. 9 plus 2 plus 4 plus 3, which is 18. And I'm going to go to the next page, but 18 is a multiple of 9, which means it's divisible by 9. And the last one is number 10. This one is also really easy. A number is divisible by 10 if it ends in a 0. So if it ends in a 0, so 730 ends in a 0, so that means it is divisible by 10. So guys, these rules are just to help you to be able to look at a number and really quickly figure out what other numbers go into it evenly. So let's do some examples. I do want you to write these examples in your notebook, and then you guys are going to continue on solving some more problems in the slideshow. So number 1, so we're using the divisibility rules to circle the answers. So number 1 is 10. So we need to go through and see which of these numbers will go into 10. So let's start with 2. So remember 2, the rule for 2 is if it's an even number, 2 will go into it. So even means it ends in a 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. So 10 ends in a 0, so that means it is divisible by 2, so we can circle 2. So on your paper, you can just write number 1 and 10, and then kind of off to the side. So yours can look like this. You can write number 1 and 10, and then off to the side, you can just write 2. Okay? So now we're going on to 3. Remember 3, for 3 we add up the digits and see if it's divisible by 3. So we have a 1 and a 0, so 1 plus 0, that's just 1. And 1 is not a multiple of 3, so this is not divisible by 3. So I'm going to scratch 3 out because it's not divisible by 3. 4. So let's go back and look at the rule for number 4. A number is divisible by 4 if it is even and can be divided by 2 twice. So we have to be careful because number 10 is even, but it can't be divided by 2 twice, because if we divide 10 once, we get 5, right? But we can't divide it again without getting a decimal. So that means number 4 is out. Number 5, so remember number 5, if a number ends in a 0 or a 5, it is divisible by 5. This one ends in 0, so that means it is divisible by 5. So your next answer is 5. Okay, let's go back and look at the rule for 6. It says a number is divisible by 6 if it is divisible by both 2 and 3. Well, if you look, we already said that 10 is not divisible by 3, right? So that means it's not going to be divisible by 6. Then we have 9. So remember 9 is like 3. We add up the digits. So we already did that. So we got 1 plus 0 is 1. And we have to see if it's a multiple of 9. 1 is not a multiple of 9. Okay, so that means number 9 is out. And to be divisible by 10, the number has to end in a 0. This one does end in a 0, so that means it is divisible by 10. Okay, so this is what you should have on your paper right there in blue. You should have number 1, 10. You can draw a little arrow, and we're going to write what it is divisible by. And we're going to go and we're going to do that for all the rest of them. Okay, so number 2. So remember, to be divisible by 2, it has to be even. So 15 does not end in an even number, so 2 is not divisible. So for 3, remember we add up the digits. So we're going to do 1 plus 5 gives us 6. And we need to see if 3 is a multiple of 6. And it is, right? Because 3, it's 3, 6, 9, 12, and then you just keep going and going. So 6 is a multiple of 3, so that means that 3 works. For 4, it has to be even and can be divided twice. Well, we already said this is not an even number, so that's a no. 5 has to end in a 5 or a 0. This one ends in a 5, so that's yes. 6, same thing. We add up the, 6 was when it's divisible by 2 and 3. Well, if you look, it's not divisible by 2, so that means 6 won't work. For 9, we do like we did with 3. We add up the digits, so we already added them. 1 plus 5 is 6. But 6 is not a multiple of 9. Multiples of 9 is going to be 9, 18, 27. So that's not an answer. And last but not least is 10. Remember, 10 means it ends in a 0. This does not end in a 0, so that's out. Okay, so make sure you're writing this in your notebook. Number 3 is going to be 27. So 2, remember it's an even number. That's out. 3, so for 3 we add up the separate digits, so 2 plus 7 gives me 9, and 9 is a multiple of 3. Remember, 3, 6, 9. So it is a multiple, so 3 works. 4 means it has to be even and can be divided twice. Well, it's not even, so 4 is out. 5, it has to end in a 0 or 5. This ends in a 7, so 5 is out. 6, 6 means it has to be divisible by both 2 and 3. Well, it's not divisible by 2, so 6 is out. 9, so again 9, we add up the numbers, so we got 2 plus 7 is 9. And it has to be a multiple of 9. Well, it is a multiple because remember it's 9, 27, and you can keep going. So it is a multiple of 9, so that counts. And then 10, it has to end in a 0. This does not, so 10 does not count. Okay, last one, number 4, is this long number. See, these are the numbers that the rules are really going to help us because we can just look at it and tell. So it is even, so that means 2 is an option. So for 3, remember we add up our digits. So we have 4 plus 5, which is 9, plus 1 is 10, plus 8 is 18. Now 18 is a multiple of 3, because remember we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, right? That's a multiple of 3, so that means 3 works. 4 means it's we have to be able to cut it in half twice. Well, we can just look at this last number. Oh, just the 8, sorry. So if we cut 8 in half, we get 4, and then we can cut that in half again to get 2. So that means it is divisible by 4. 5, it has to end in a 0 or a 5. This does not, so that one doesn't work. 6 means it has to be divisible by 2 and 3, which this one does, so 6 works. 9, again, we add up the digits, which we already did and got 18. And 18 is a multiple of 9, so that means 9 works. And for 10, it has to end in a 0. This does not end in a 0, so 10 does not work. Okay? So now what you need to do is finish the other problems on this PowerPoint in your notebook. Okay? And then after you finish, you need to work on an iReady lesson. Okay? And if you finish an iReady lesson, then you can do Prodigy.